In 2019, Marvel Comics held a Thor-based crossover event called the War of the Realms that saw MacLeod the Accursed, leader of the Dark Elves of Svartalfheim, launch an all-out invasion of the other 8 realms. Which I guess makes it more like a war through the realms rather than a war of the realms.
After the Dark Elves launch a surprise attack on Asgard with the intent of moving on to Midgard, aka Earth, Thor's adopted mother Frigga sends out a warning call to the planet. This call wound up being picked up by typical power players, the Avengers, the X-Men, Doctor Strange, and also the Punisher for some reason.
Because of course you want a guy with no superpowers or high-tech power armor taking on a group of mystical beings. Not to mention the Punisher's relationship with the rest of the Marvel Universe is, a little problematic, don't you think?
Frank Castle reveres Captain America, as that's who inspired him to join the Marines, though Cap really does not seem to hold Frank in the same regard. Not to mention there's Castle's tenuous relationships with contemporaries like Spider-Man, Daredevil, Wolverine, etc. And it's all really due to one major thing.
The Punisher kills people. I know that's stating the obvious, but it's also kind of weird given that the likes of Captain America, Wolverine, Bucky, and a few others have also killed supervillains throughout their runs, but that's usually more of a final option where they just don't have any other choice. In Frank Castle's case, it's really the only option. That being said, the Punisher's also had a few defenders here and there. He's held in pretty good standing by Moon Knight, and to a lesser extent, Black Widow has also gotten along with him from time to time.
Still, the Punisher goes after those who prey on the innocent, and war, even one throughout the realms, tends to have a lot of innocent victims that get caught in the crossfire, which means that even after Malekith's forces are driven back to Svartalfheim, Frank Castle is going to go after them.
That being said, old Frankie's going to need a little bit of help to do all of this from some rather unique sources. So let's join the Punisher as he sets out to avenge the most innocent victims of the War of the Realms. This is Punisher Kill Krew.
As one of Malekith's troops lies dying in the streets, New Yorkers get to work, raiding a nearby grocery store. Upon exiting, they wind up running smack dab into the Punisher, and he'll let them go, only if they come back and pay for what they grabbed. Until then, they can chow down on Flambéed Frost Giant. Frank then toasts a hellhound as he finds a local bar being populated by Asgardians enjoying some celebratory brewskis. Upset that these so-called gods are still letting people get killed in the streets, Frank begins blasting away, bringing the attention of Thor. The god of thunder and rock and roll actually sides with Castle and puts his fellow Aesir in the streets before thanking the Punisher for his work during the conflict. But for Frank Castle, the war never truly ends. The Punisher moves on to a nearby cemetery and a man just known as Mr. Jones, who's mourning his lost family. Frank apologizes to Jones as the monster that killed his family got sent back to Svartalfheim by accident. Jones is surprisingly okay with that, as he's found some people in similar circumstances and in need of a good monster hunter.
Mr. Jones's wife and child were killed by a frost giant named Casikla, who threw their car at Frank Castle while the family was inside. Castle pursued the frost giant only for him to get sucked into a portal that humans couldn't pass through that was created by Doctor Strange. Strange couldn't allow humans to pass through out of fear that the giants would then use those for human abduction purposes. To that end, the Punisher promised to hunt down Casikla and kill him in order to properly avenge Jones's family, with picture evidence to support the argument. Now it appears that Jones has found some children who have gone through similar circumstances.
Castle is not too happy to have kids involved, but he treats them to pizza and has each of them draw a picture of the monsters who killed their loved ones on each of the dinner menus, except for one kid who wound up drawing on one of the tables instead. He then makes the same vow to the kids that he made to Mr. Jones, including proof of death via smartphone picture.
You know, given that the Punisher is a wanted criminal, he must have one hell of a VPN on that phone to keep law enforcement from tracking down whenever he pings on a location anywhere.
Castle takes out a zombie on his way into Central Park, stopping only briefly to pick up the creature's horned helmet. It turns out one of the kids identified a tree monster dwelling in the park as the killer of his parents. It doesn't take long for him to spot the monster attempting to chow down on a dog walker. All it takes is a well-thrown grenade into the creature's mouth to eliminate it. That being said, Frank is going to need some help as he needs to get to Svartalheim and Kasikla. He winds up heading over to Dr. Strange's Sanctum Sanctorum, where it turns out one of Thor's goats is receiving a parking ticket. Castle is able to bribe the creature with a few apples and attaches it to his battle van to pull it to Svartalheim.
Thor normally has two goats pull his chariot, Tooth Gnasher and Tooth Grinder. This one is Tooth Gnasher, and don't worry, Thor isn't really going to miss him too much throughout the rest of the story.
Upon reaching Svartalheim, Punisher happens across two dark elves holding a frost giant hostage. Frank comes to the rescue of the frost giant, as it turns out this is one of Malekith's master navigators named Belith. Frank's done his research and knows that Belith can track down all the various creatures that are needed in his mission, and he'll do so from the front of the battle van. Up first is Jotunheim, where Frank is trying to track down what appears to be a shark with mechanical appendages.
I took nature's most perfect killing machine and needlessly turned it into a robot.
Belith is able to track the shark not to Jotunheim, but actually to Counter-Earth in the realm of the High Evolutionary. Castle is able to use his finest firearms to track the monster down. There he finds the shark has actually taken a hostage. Franklin Nelson, attorney at law.
Franklin Foggy Nelson is, of course, the on-again, off-again legal partner of Matt Murdock, a.k.a. Daredevil. Foggy was quite literally snatched while exiting a courthouse by the giant shark, which does beg the question of, who exactly holds a trial in the middle of an invasion?
Punisher launches an explosion into the shark's mouth just before it can devour Foggy, who winds up covered in the monster's green blood, but gladly accepts the free ride home, just as soon as Frank is done with his mission. From there, they actually do proceed on to Jotunheim, where hopefully they can track down Kasikla, only to find that a group of frost giants have instead taken someone else hostage. None other than Cain Marko.
It's the Juggernaut, bitch.
It turns out the frost giants are planning to chow down on old Juggernaut, so Castle has Foggy try to provide some type of legal defense in order to distract the creatures long enough for him to free the Juggernaut, who winds up attacking all of them and killing most of them before they can actually track down any more information on Kasikla. Even Foggy manages to kill one of the frost giants after it accidentally trips on a rock and lands on his sword. When down to the last frost giant, Castle begins torturing it to the point that Juggernaut heaves on Foggy. It works, as it turns out. Kasikla is in Nidavellir, home of the dwarves, where he has sealed himself in a bunker of pure uru, the same metal Thor's hammer Mjolnir is made out of. That being said, they can't go after Kasikla just yet, as there's still the other monsters Frank needs to track down from his list. Added to that, they're going to need some type of weapon that can actually cut through uru, and Foggy knows of only one thing that can: the Ebony Blade.
The Ebony Blade is the chief weapon of Dane Whitman, a.k.a. the Black Knight. And yes, the sword is strong enough to cut through just about any metal, including adamantium and uru. Now then, for the longest time it was believed that only the pure-hearted could properly wield the blade. However, it was later revealed that the blade actually thrives on the energies of hatred and angst. In fact, it can actually corrupt whoever wields it. This came during a storyline called King in Black, which connected it to the symbiotes of the Spider-Man comics. But we'll have to say more for that later.
The group is forced to head back to Earth so Foggy can call Daredevil about Black Knight's whereabouts. Thor is actually able to reveal that Dane Whitman is in Svartalheim battling more of the Dark Elves. The group then prepares to journey back to the realm, forgetting that they promised to drop off Foggy along the way. It doesn't take long to locate the Black Knight, as Tooth Gnasher literally plows into his elven nemesis. He joins up as he recognizes one of the monsters as being from nowhere, the deceased Celestial head turned into a giant space settlement. They find the monster dwelling at a bar and question it about Kasikla's whereabouts, and then kill him after sitting down to a plate of spicy buffalo wings. From there, it's on to take on the remaining monsters on Frank's list, including one that dropped a set of rare jewels, which everyone takes to set up a fund for the orphans.
Yeah, that's a ticket.
Finally, they reach Nidavellir and Kasikla. However, it's still not going to be easy, as the door to the bunker is at least 12 feet thick. The Frost Giant is more than aware of Punisher's pursuit and thinks it's well safe inside. However, each member of the team begins wailing away on the door with the Ebony Blade until eventually Castle manages to crack through.
Here's Johnny!
However, Kasikla is prepared with an ancient dwarven rocket launcher, which knocks out Castle and throws everyone back, except for Froggy, who does his best to run away in the battle van. The Punisher is then suspended over a fire pit with Casikla planning a cookout. It's then that Foggy has a change of heart and comes crashing back to the scene to resuscitate the Juggernaut. The two then move on to wake up the Black Knight and storm Casikla's chamber to free Frank and toss the ebony blade to him. The Punisher is able to pull the cool delayed decapitation move, and thus Casikla is finally dead, meaning they can all now go home. Upon reaching Earth, where Tooth Gnasher manages to break up a mugging that also results in Bailiff's death, Castle thanks everyone for their help, even making good with the Black Knight and Juggernaut. Foggy, meanwhile, has set up things for the orphans at the next pizza party. Mr. Jones is oddly calm of finally hearing of Casikla's death. He seems to play it off as not much, but Frank knows that something is up. That night, Castle pays Jones a visit at his home and enters the room to find the man attempting to smother himself to death. Frank cuts Mr. Jones free and calls emergency services. Castle points out that the pain of loss is an enemy that must die in order to move on. It never really gets better, you just need to find a way to fight it. Like, say, taking in a bunch of orphans who have gone through the same pain and might get lost in the foster system. You just have to fight every day until the end. Except for Frank Castle. For him, the story never does truly end.
And that concludes our look at Punisher Kill Krew. How was it? Well, on the plus side, I do think there's some decent artwork throughout the story that overall has some really great storytelling throughout all of it, and has a good undercurrent of dark humor that helps keep things a little bit light and not so bogged down on anything. Also, the pacing of the story is top-notch, as there's not a lot of dead spots throughout all of it. And to top it all off, I don't think you necessarily need to have read War of the Realms in order to understand what was going on. I mean, it doesn't help there's an introductory page explaining War of the Realms, but still, you can read this without having to know. All you need to know is there's a storyline called War of the Realms, and here's a little bit of what happened in it, and you still pretty much can jump right in. If there is a drawback to the story is that, and I know this is weird since we're talking about a Punisher story, I think the ending is unnecessarily dark. To have Mr. Jones attempt to unalive himself, it kind of comes out of nowhere. I mean, he seems to be an indecent spirit, and I understand for a lot of times when this happens that can be a cover, but he was more than willing to help those kids out. He was more than willing to open himself up to let them in. He didn't shut them away, so it didn't really make any sense for him to suddenly try to pull this. I mean, maybe you could have had something where he doesn't understand what he's going to do next, are they going to get lost in the system, and then have Frank suggest, hey, you clearly have opened up yourself to this. Maybe this is what you're meant to do, instead of what he winds up doing, if that makes any sense. I'm trying to be as light as I can, as obviously YouTube tends to frown on this, and it's understandably so. But yeah, I do think the ending is a little bit of a clunker. Not necessarily in tone, just in tone to the rest of the, in relation to the rest of the story is where it falls apart. And it's kind of for that reason I have to give Punisher Kill Krew a B. I would have given this an A, but the proviso of if you are upset by depictions of unaliving, this might upset you a little bit. So again, let's dial it back a little bit. So if you are sensitive to that stuff, you can avoid it if you need to. And with that, let's see what we're doing next time on the Random Trade Review.
Hey guys, remember you can help support the channel at patreon.com/sleepytimeforcat productions. There you can request a tray to be put in the randomizer, aka the cardboard box. And as always, remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring that notification bell.